Welcome to everybody again. I'm Charles Weiss. I'm a professor at the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. I'm a biochemical physicist by training, but that was a long time ago. And I've been teaching in the program of Science, Technology, and International Affairs at Georgetown. And I'm moderating. I've been asked to be a bit provocative, which I will try to be. I will also ask our distinguished speakers to introduce themselves and introduce their general reaction to the report in a few minutes. I will also ask them to be aware that I will ask them to explain any acronyms that they use and to slow down if they use the technical terms that they would talk to specialists on the assumption that we have a mixed audience here. And with that, I will introduce first Karil Kochenderfer on my left, Tom Redick is over here, Alison you know already, and Mark Walton over here. Why don't we start with Karil? Would you tell the audience a bit about yourself? And I think you have a bit of a presentation you want to make, so let's go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for being a part of this. CAS has always been known for putting some technically sound documents together with real integrity that are easily readable by general public and policymakers, so I applaud CAS. Thank you so much. And Dr. Arden, you've done an excellent paper here. I think there's only one question that I have, and that I would critique this paper on, that is, the dialogue that we're having right now is terribly limited. We live in a biotech century. Biotech food is, biotechnology is a tool, it's a process, it's not food. Biotechnology is present in so many aspects of our life, and unfortunately so much of this broad conversation, much less this paper, is focused on food alone. And I think it's to our detriment, because when you look at all these various other aspects, and I'd be happy to enumerate a few, you begin to realize, well, this is quite commonplace. And everything that you just spoke about is so very true. It's a quite safe and accepted process in technology. I'll give you an example. We talk about biotech drugs. When we look at insulin, when we look at Enbrel, arthritis, when we look at heart disease, when we look at Redick for leukemia, when we look at even our simple blood transfusions, those are biotech. We look at industrial biotechnology, and you start looking at wastewater. We use biotech enzymes in the production and cleaning of our morning glass of water that we use to brush our teeth. We have plastics that are now derived from biotech enzymes. We have biotech or biofuels, corn with fortified starch levels that is now helping to reduce our reliance on carbon, and that's biotech. Then we start looking at the enzymes that go into paints. For those of us that are wearing bright purple, bright pink, bright other colors, those are biotech enzymes that make those colors so bright. And it's not just in the dyes that we use in our textiles, but in the dyes in our paints. And then we could go on into other aspects of biotechnology, not just food. And so when you start having this broader conversation, you realize biotech is very much a part of our lives. So it's not surprising that Business Week and Time Magazine in 1999, as we embarked on the 21st century, said we live in the biotech century. So why don't we label all of these products? And frankly, let's have a really robust conversation. But I don't understand why we're limiting this conversation to biotechnology and food alone. It's a very narrow and frankly a negative, inverse conversation, when frankly this technology has so much to offer.
Thank you.
Well, yes, I will say I'm a lawyer in solo practice in St. Louis. And since approximately 1997 or so, I've represented the American Soybean Association, which you saw the 93% adoption rate. There's a reason. We've saved billions of dollars using these crops. We've also, because consumers wanted it, we created and helped everybody manage a non-GMO marketplace that's thriving and meets everyone's needs. Go into Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, that's all you can buy. They don't sell any GMO milk, soy milk or tofu. And it's actually very hard to find it, so don't even bother looking, I do. The animals, however, love this. We found that it's safer for animals to eat. Biotech corn, for example, has less mycotoxin in it than a comparable organic or conventional corn. And we had a recent terrible mycotoxin outbreak in the recent drought, which frankly I had to do a project for Farm Bureau on managing mycotoxins, because it's a huge issue. It's a very difficult problem. In Central America, where they don't manage it, people actually have neural tube defects in babies and have liver damage and all the problems that go with mycotoxins. Biotech crops in Honduras now can prevent that. They looked at that issue, they said we should grow biotech crops in Honduras. So there's clearly safety issues that are positive. So when you look at a law that says we're worried about health and safety, which is what Europe did in 2003 when they passed their law, and we want to label that process, just the process for safety, and then they include things like soybean oil that don't have a protein or anything any food scientist could ever say could be a problem. They stepped over a line that's clearly in violation of WTO. The day after they passed that law, my client, the Soybean Association, told USTR, please go to bat and stop this law. They have not done so and said we have cool and we have, But it's clear that after European economists looked at this, billions of dollars of trade was disrupted. People replaced US soybeans and corn with canola and other crops. And did the consumers benefit? Well, clearly not. And when you look at these new state laws that are coming out, unlike some that, like Vietnam, I was counsel of Vietnam, they passed a 5% GM labeling law, which is 5% tolerance for GM content. They kind of copied Japan, which has been doing a 5% for years. The California law was 0.9, and I disagree a little with Alison, because I'm firmly in the camp of they want to go to 0 in 2019. It's a technology forcing concept in environmental law. We do things in environmental law. The EPA passes Clean Water Act with standards nobody yet has complied with that are technology forcing. So they would like.
Excuse me, you mean that the definition of non-GMO goes down and down and down?
Yeah. And by doing that, you make it more difficult for anyone to grow a GMO, because in the current legal marketplace, we have the Supreme Court of the United States using the word contamination, in an opinion, the Geertsen Farms, which even though Monsanto said we won and we did reverse a nationwide injunction, we still have this National Environmental Policy Act at courts in California have come out saying we have to protect non-GMO and organic growers from pollen drift and other.
So I don't understand what the problem is. If nobody can grow a certified non-GMO product, then everything is by definition GMO and you're home free.
Well, we love our non-GMO. We get paid extra. When there's a tight market in Japan, we get 100% premium on our non-GMO soybeans and corn. I think the state laws look a little like my daughter when she was 5 years old skating on thin ice into, say, a Stanley Cup winning hockey team. Because you have a front line of maybe Gordie Howe and his sons were Commerce Clause, First Amendment the preemption of facts, and behind them there's these economic issues, including the fact that I have a thriving non-GMO marketplace. And if I go to either the Commerce Clause or the World Trade Organization, that's a least burdensome alternative that substitutes for the mandatory mandated. And that you win those cases because you have that economic backup of a robust marketplace.
So in other words, you're very happy with the present two-tier system where you get extra for non-GMO and everybody else gets a cheaper GMO product. That works well for your people.
Well, certainly, the only place where there's a food product that might have some GMO would be maybe corn chips and tortillas. And we saw that in the Starlink recall 10 years ago, where the only things being recalled were kind of the whole protein, milled products. If we had a similar problem since then, I haven't heard about it, but anything like that even could be an allergen. And a lot of the new crops are actually, as I said, they're probably safer in food supply than some of what we're seeing.
Well, thank you. Mark Walton?
Charles, thank you.
You're playing cleanup.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm an agronomist by training. I'm a plant scientist, plant geneticist, and about 10 years ago, I kingdom jumped, and I've been in the animal world ever since, working both on totally non-controversial issues like livestock cloning, and now on gene editing of livestock. And
You might want to explain what that is. That's a very interesting.
Gene editing is the next iteration of genetic modification that's done without some of the approaches, without recombinant DNA, as Alison defined it. It's simply taking advantage of the fact that our cells repair DNA breaks all the time, and if we can target a break and tell the cell what repair we want, it'll happen. And so what I wanted to bring up is, and Karil sort of framed this, that she said, this is a really very narrow discussion. And then Tom actually made the points about why it's, that it is, in fact, it's a very narrow discussion. And as a scientist, I sit here and I think to myself, if this was, in fact, about science, we would be having a panel discussion on how we have increased productivity in the face of decreasing land resources and decreasing water resources. We'd be talking about the fact that an American farmer can feed 155 people, when only 40 years ago that number was something like 28 people. We'd be talking about the fact that these technologies are going to be imperative to use if we're going to feed another 2 billion people that are going to join us on the planet in the next 20 years or so. And so obviously this is not about science. This is not simply about safety or lack of safety. This is about the fact that in 2019, people hope that the zero GM label will in fact drive GM out of business. And in my opinion, and it's backed up by lots of different resources, the folks who are promulgating the labeling issues are those folks who stand to benefit by not having GM crops in the marketplace. If you look at Prop 37, and the largest source of funding for Prop 37, the pro side, the labeling side, it was the organic food industry. And the fact that we have labeling bills being talked about in 25 different states simply gives them 25 opportunities to frighten consumers who are 2 generations at least removed from their food supply and think that it comes from the grocery store. And in the absence of that first-hand experience, knowledge on the farm, most consumers simply aren't in a position to evaluate it. And I have to admit that the pro-labeling folks have done a very good job of frightening people, a much better job than what we've done from a scientific community standpoint of explaining why they shouldn't be frightened about these particular things. So I'm looking forward to the panel discussion as well and the opportunity to explore some of those issues.
Well, thank you all. And let me start by asking a few questions, and then we'll turn it over to our a very sophisticated and well-informed audience, I have to say, judging from the extensions on the email of the RSVPs. The broad question is, what are we afraid of? Given the advantages of GM crops and GM drugs and GM plastics and GM enzymes and GM this and GM that, what's the problem? Why are we playing defensive ball rather than offensive ball? Highlighting the advantages of all this technology. Maybe I should ask Alison to start.
Well, I guess to me a little bit, some of this comes as a concern as to what's actually started to happen when you do start having brands that are getting targeted for having genetically engineered products in their products, and the companies are naturally concerned about their brand reputation. And so we've already seen a couple of companies, Cheerios and Grape Nuts, that have gone non-GMO.
Why don't they say we're guaranteed that we contain GMOs? It's better that way.
Because, in my opinion, I think they're concerned about getting targeted by groups opposed to the technology and having their brands come under scrutiny. I think Chobani, Greek yogurt, has seen that happen to them, that they're being targeted as not being natural because their milk comes from cows that have eaten genetically engineered feed. And that's basically the tactic that was used in Europe to drive those products off the market. And what happens there is you don't get the choice of non-GM and GM, you just get the non-GM choice, and the rest get driven off the market. We've seen that with the salmon, where it hasn't even been approved or a decision hasn't even been made by it, but we've had groups go and target Safeway and a couple of other chains to say they absolutely will not carry that product. Well, that's not choice. There's no choice there to buy that product. And so I think the concern is that groups that are opposed to the technology will use the label as a way to boycott that product, and consumers that don't know anything about GE have just heard scary stuff about it, it's going to cause bad things, and they're going to see it as a warning label, and in the absence, it really doesn't tell you anything genetically engineered. It doesn't tell you what it's genetically engineered for or anything substantial about it, and so it sounds kind of scary, and if you're not a scientist, you might not even know what that means, but boy, if it's got a label on there and it has to, it must be something wrong with it. And so I think those are some of the reasons I think there's pushback in a marketplace where there's such high prevalence of genetically engineered products.
Any further thoughts from the panel?
Well, I'd like to comment on what Mark said, that GM labeling laws protect the organic grower. I have organic clients, and we do not sell pure GM-free. We're not allowed to even say that. FDA would send us a warning letter. We buy seed that's 2 to 5% rare. So what will happen in Vermont? You'll have a law that says everybody has to be 0.9 except the organic. And that means people will be eating unwittingly organic food with 2 to 5% GM content. And will they know that? Will they be told that? No, you won't be told that. And the NOP, by the way, the National Organic Program, has no tolerance. By that I don't mean it's a zero. They don't have anything but don't intentionally use it. Unless no seed is available, then you could actually plant the GMO, get flooded out, certifier allows it. You could actually plant a GMO and sell it as organic under the organic system. But it would never, you should not be tested under the organic system. Only Whole Foods with its 0.9 is testing my organic clients. Others go to the farmer's market and are happy.
Yeah, I think there are so many dynamics. I mean, somebody compared this to like a peeled onion. You just keep peeling back layer upon layer of arguments and complexities, and there's so many aspects of this. And I think two that really stand out for me personally are, one is, when I was growing up, there was a national voice that stood up for science. That there were gatekeepers, that when we went outside the bounds of a civil discussion, they said, you've gone beyond those bounds. Or that what you're saying is totally not factual. Those gatekeepers used to be very highly respected journalists. We all remember Uncle Walter Cronkite. But there were journalists like that at so many institutions that were highly regarded gatekeepers. Those gatekeepers are gone now that we've got social media and we're having one-on-one dialogues. And frankly, I'm actually very scared just broadly about the nature of our civil discourse. It's very, I'm not sure if something of great elation or sadness were to occur, whether we could come together around anything together, much less the safety of these products. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I think it's already been alluded to, how many have seen a corn borer lay 100 eggs? And how many, well, there's one hand, how many of you made your breakfast this morning straight from cornmeal? When I think it was the scientific Director General of the European Food Safety Scientific Authority that basically said, you can't appreciate the benefits of this technology, or you can't appreciate the benefits if you don't know the risks. And if you've got one corn borer laying 100 eggs, and those eggs are going to destroy your crop, your livelihood, that what you've invested, your home and your family, then what's the benefit of this technology if you don't know it? Sitting in a city, you don't feel those risks. And I think with 99% of us having our food made by 1% of the farmers out in America, we don't know that risk.